Before we begin today, I want to share something with you. When we talk about self trust, it can sound like something we're supposed to arrive at. Like there's a place where one day you can just trust yourself completely, and that's the end of the story. I don't experience it that way. I'm 4 years past my divorce, and in many areas of my life, I trust myself. I trust the way I run my life. I trust the decisions I make day to day. And I trust the work I do and how I show up in it. But when it comes to men, that's where I feel it. I notice that I hold back. I don't really put myself out there, and I don't let myself feel attraction very easily. And it's not because I don't want connection. It's because that's where I've experienced the deepest pain and the most confusion, the most mind ache and heartache. Like most survivors of abuse, I didn't recognize what was happening while I was in it. There were many moments where I questioned, I felt something wasn't right, and I'd talk myself out of it. I stayed longer than I should have. And that leaves an imprint. So now, when it comes to men, there's a part of me that says, be careful. Don't get pulled in and don't get caught in something you can't clearly see. I want to be really honest with you here. I don't share this because I have it all figured out. I share it because I'm still walking this path. I'm still learning what it means to trust myself in places where I have been hurt. And I know I'm not the only one. When a woman says she doesn't trust herself anymore, it's not about one decision. It's about what she's lived through and what her system has learned from it. So today, I want to talk about self trust, not as something you should already have, but as something that can return even after everything you've been through. So if you're wondering why you don't trust yourself anymore, you're not alone. And the first place most women go is to self blame. They think they should have known. They think they missed something. They think they made a mistake that they should have avoided. And I've been there too. But what I've come to understand is this: not trusting yourself is not a failure, it's an adaptation. It's something your system learned in order to get through what you were living in. So let's start there. Why don't I trust myself? For many women, it's not just about one decision or one moment. It becomes the quiet belief that their mistakes carry more weight than anything else they've ever done. If there was a balance sheet, the mistake side would feel so much bigger than the heavier side, like it cancels out everything else. And from that place, trust doesn't just feel shaky, it feels undeserved. So they stop listening to themselves. They lose touch with their instincts, that gut feeling, that quiet inner knowing that used to be there once upon a time. Instead, they start questioning everything, and everything turns inward. It turns into questioning, replaying, second guessing. What did I miss? Why didn't I see that? And how did I let that happen? And I've been there. But what I've come to understand is this: you don't lose your ability to trust yourself. You adapted. You learned to override what you felt. You learned to stay when something didn't feel quite right. You even learned to explain things away and give the benefit of the doubt just to keep the connection, to keep things calm. And those things didn't come from weakness. They came from trying to make something work, trying to hold something together, and trying to stay connected to someone who mattered to you. And when you do that over and over again, your internal voice gets quieter. It gets harder to hear, harder to trust, and easier to question. So now, when you're sitting there wondering why you don't trust yourself, it's not because you can't. It's because you haven't been able to hear yourself clearly. And that's a very different place to begin from. So, why should I trust myself? That question isn't always said out loud, but it sits underneath everything. You learn to go against what you felt. You felt something wasn't quite right, and you still talked yourself out of it. You had a hesitation and ignored it. You wanted to say no, but you said yes instead. You told yourself you were overreacting and that it wasn't that bad, that you just needed to give it more time. And you did that because you were trying to make something work. So, why should you trust yourself again? That's a fair question, but it's built on something that isn't quite true. Self trust is not about getting everything right. It's not about perfect decisions. It's not about never missing something. Self trust is about being able to rely on yourself. It's about knowing that whatever happens, you will listen to yourself. You will notice how things feel in the body. You won't silence yourself just to keep a relationship going. And when that begins to change, your confidence begins to return. Decisions don't feel quite as heavy. There's a little more space to breathe, a little less urgency to get everything exactly right. The pressure starts to lift. You're no longer trying to prove that you can trust yourself. You're beginning to experience it in small, quiet, real ways. Your grounded inner dialogue begins. It might sound something like this. Maybe I can listen to myself again. Maybe I can trust what I feel just a little bit more than I did before. And slowly, those maybes become, I know I can. And that's where confidence begins to bloom. And this is where things start to feel frustrating. Because hearing that confidence can return feels good. But knowing how to get there is something else entirely. You might find yourself wondering, where do I even start? What does trusting myself actually look like in real life? Because it's not as simple as just deciding to do it. If it were, you would already have done it. So instead of trying to figure it all out at once, let's bring it down to something much simpler. So, how do you begin to build self trust? Well, it's not all at once, and it's not by making a big decision, and certainly by not trying to get it right. It begins much smaller and in quieter ways than you might expect. It begins in the moments you would normally move past without noticing. A moment where something doesn't quite feel right, but instead of brushing it off, you pause. You don't move into fix it mode and you don't try to figure it out. You just notice. You notice that feeling in your body, that hesitation, that little tightening, or the sense of pulling back. That's one of the first places self-trust begins to return. And when you pause and notice, you can determine what is best for you. Building self-trust shows up in simple, everyday moments. You're in a conversation and something feels off. You suddenly get uncomfortable. Normally, you might smile or nod and keep going and tell yourself it's nothing. But this time you notice. You begin a short internal talk that sounds like, why am I uncomfortable? And where do I feel this in my body? And as you pause and listen and begin to understand that this conversation is not an actual conversation, it's a person talking and talking and talking only about themselves. They haven't asked one question about you or what you think. Now, you don't have to act on it right away, but you don't dismiss it either. You are now aware. Or you're about to say yes to something, and there's a part of you that hesitates. Just a small pause, like an inhale. And instead of pushing past it, you sit with it for a moment. You ask yourself, do I actually want this? Or maybe it's even simpler than that. You're tired. And your first instinct is to keep going anyways, to push through and get it done. But this time, you notice the fatigue and you choose differently. You choose to rest. Those moments don't look like much from the outside, but they matter. Because every time you notice what you feel and take that seriously, you are rebuilding trust. And it doesn't mean you'll get it right every time. There will still be moments you ignore it and moments where you go back into old patterns. And that's all part of it. That's part of learning. But now you begin to see it. And that changes everything. Self-trust isn't built in big life-changing decisions. It's built in these small, real moments where you begin to listen again, where you begin to take yourself seriously, where you begin to respond to what you feel instead of pushing past it. And over time, those small moments begin to add up. You start to recognize your own signals. You start to understand what your body is telling you. You start to feel that quiet knowing again, and this time you don't ignore it. That's how self-trust is built, not all at once, but in a way that is real and personal. So, what does self-trust do for you? Not in theory, but in your everyday life. Self-trust starts to change how you experience yourself. You're no longer questioning every thought, and you're no longer pulling yourself in different directions, trying to figure out what's right. There's less noise. You're not arguing with yourself in the same way. Decisions begin to feel different. Not easier necessarily, but definitely clearer. You don't need as much outside input. You don't need as much reassurance. You can sit with something, feel it, and know what's right for you. And that changes how you move through your life. You're not as easily pulled into something that doesn't feel right. You notice it sooner. And instead of talking yourself out of it, you take it seriously. You begin to live with confidence, not loud, not something that you have to prove, but something you feel. A sense of, I can handle this. I can trust what I feel, and I can trust the decisions I make. Even I can trust myself to respond if something isn't right. And that changes your relationships. You're not looking for someone else to tell you who you are. You're not shaping yourself to keep someone else happy. You're showing up as yourself and letting that be enough. It also changes how you recover from difficult circumstances and relationships. Because even if something doesn't go the way you hoped, you don't collapse in the same way. You don't turn it into, I should have known I can't trust myself. You don't turn it into something being wrong with you. You reflect, you learn, and you keep moving. And slowly, your life begins to feel different, more grounded, more yours. Not because everything outside of you has changed, but because your relationship with yourself has changed. If you're listening to this and something in you is recognizing yourself, if you feel that place where you've been questioning yourself, where your confidence has been shaken, where you want to build trust with yourself again, but you don't quite know how, this is exactly the space that we can work together. Not by fixing you and not by telling you what to do, but by helping you reconnect to your own voice so you can begin to trust yourself in a way that feels real to you. If you're ready for that kind of support, I would encourage you to book a Heartbreak Freedom session with me. The link is in the description. You don't have to do this alone. Now, as you move through the rest of your day, may you begin to notice yourself a little more gently. Not with judgment, not with pressure, but with a quiet willingness to see what's already there. May you recognize the moments where something doesn't feel quite right, and instead of pushing past it, you pause. May you begin to trust that what you feel matters, that it's worth noticing, that it's worth listening to, that you don't have to get it perfect to begin. May your confidence return to you in the choices you make, in the moments you pause, and in the way you begin to take yourself seriously again. And that's enough for now.